realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own, populated with their own ambitions, friends, routines, worries, and inherited craziness. An epic story that continues invisibly around you like an anthill sprawling deep underground. In those stories, you might appear only once, as an extra sipping coffee in the background, as a blur of traffic passing on the highway, as a lighted window at dusk. And those moments are the faint links between different worlds, snaking through every look and every touch and every shoulder brushed. We hardly notice those links, and even when we do, we can never fully appreciate the strangeness of their paths or the complexities of the stories to which they lead. There is no easy answer as to why Kenny died that New Year's Day. It was Rial's .357 caliber revolver and his finger on the trigger, but the islander was not his target. Rial had mistaken him for a rival outlaw. The two did not know each other and shared nothing other than their presence in the restaurant that afternoon. Kenny died simply because he was there, because the other restaurant he had wanted to visit was closed, because he'd picked the wrong day to crave Vietnamese food. Leaving his homeland of Samoa to preach the gospel, Kenny had been the protagonist of his own epic. But that afternoon, he was nothing more than an unwitting, unfortunate extra, sipping tea in the background of Rial's life. As Kenny lay dying, the restaurateur Dan Dang hid in the freezer. She had not seen the bullets fly, but she had heard their murderous thunder, and she was both cold and scared. Later, Dan saw the victims on the floor. One was on his stomach, bleeding from his mouth. A young woman held the body and cried. That scene had come from a gang feud that Dan had done nothing to invite, about which she knew little and cared even less. What Dan did know, though, was her own story. She had fled a troubled Vietnam and endured the brutal high seas only to end up in a Malaysian refugee camp before finding a new life in North America. Dan screamed in her sleep that night. The restaurant had been the culmination of more than a decade's toil in a local meat plant by her and her husband, who had also been a refugee. Now Dan didn't think she could ever go back. Meanwhile, her husband worried that, with the yellow police tape sealing off the place, there was no way to put food into the aquarium and that the fish were dying. 2 days later, on January 3rd, 2009, Bitcoin was introduced into the world. And in that same Sonder-esque way that people silently pass through each other's lives, through those elusive links that meander between worlds, all that turmoil of the December raid and the New Year shooting, all that sorrow and pain, that destructive convergence of all those dissimilar lives, would be connected to a new story, albeit faintly, no more than a fleck of paint in the backdrop of an entirely different play. Act 1. 2013 high, $1,200. Chapter 1. I grew up in Wuppertal in western Germany, the birthplace of both aspirin and heroin, invented by the same guy in a 2-week period in the 19th century. My childhood began a little after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and my doctoral candidate father supported the family on the modest income typical of his position. I remember when he hauled home an old bicycle for me, all the way from another city. I hated it and never rode it. I think it used to belong to a girl. The plastic decorations on the spokes were too pink, and like the hand-me-downs I wore, the bicycle was too big. When I turned 18, it was in a job market battered by the 2008 financial crisis, a milestone marked by need and uncertainty. Banks had increasingly profited by offering risky mortgages to those who should not be getting them, and then building complicated investment products on top of them. When those borrowers couldn't repay, that triggered an avalanche in the interconnected financial system. And people around the world lost homes, jobs, and retirement savings. That same year, a faceless figure known only as Satoshi Nakamoto released a 9-page white paper made with off-brand software. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.